In tonight's features story, Washington is looking for federal help in its cleanup from December's atmospheric river event. That series of rain and windstorms washed out roads and highways and damaged other critical infrastructure throughout the state, including Highway 2, which remained closed just outside Leavenworth for 2 months. Governor Bob Ferguson said today he's asking the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency to help pay the estimated $182 million in damages.
So in terms of damage assessments that we are submitting to FEMA, this historic flooding resulted in, we believe, the largest dollar amount of public infrastructure damage in Washington state in more than 4 decades, and that's counting for inflation. So this is obviously a significant amount of money. The specific preliminary damage assessment that we're submitting is $182.3 million, 182.3. One thing I want to emphasize and underscore is this is a preliminary number. We have to meet a certain deadline for FEMA, so this number will increase as time goes on. This is very normal. So just as one example of many, we still have roads that are under snow, for example, that we still need to assess the total amount. Cost of repairs could increase as time goes on. So that number will change and will undoubtedly go up as time goes on. But the number that we're sending in is $182.3 million. We're also applying today for another FEMA program. This is called the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. This is an important program that helps fund projects to prepare for future disasters. So, for example, building flood walls, for example. So the damage in many parts of our state, as I've mentioned many times, would have been even worse, significantly worse, without infrastructure to protect against the flooding. So it's just one example in Mount Vernon. We had a media event up there. A flood wall was recently constructed in Mount Vernon just in the last decade. It's clear that flood wall saved downtown from being flooded and saved an awful lot of pain and suffering cost to many Washingtonians. So if approved for that, Washington will qualify for grant funding up to 20% of our total damage assessment. Sorry for a lot of numbers, but in this case, that would be a maximum of $36.6 million. So in other words, 20% of our $182 million, that's what we can seek for that fund that helps us do preventative work going forward. So just wanted to be clear about that. We're also working with the Federal Highway Administration to get funding for repairs to highways in the state. This is a separate process from today's application. So the preliminary damage assessment total does not include, the $182 million does not include damage to federal highways or some of our state highways. So, for example, you're very familiar with Highway 2 and the impacts there and undoubtedly the significant costs there. Our application, the $182 million, does not include Highway 2. So it's confusing on which ones are part of ours and which ones are not. These are just the rules that we're going by. If you have a question about a specific highway and you want to know if it's part of our request or not, just ask Brianna. We can get that answered for you. And what I also mention is of the $182 million, the overall request we have, we are eligible for assistance of up to 75% of that number. That's the maximum that we can, if granted, that we can receive. So again, I realize I'm giving you a lot of numbers, but 182 is the request we have. We're eligible for 75% of that. So 25% will fall upon the state and local governments to cover, even if we're granted. I really appreciate the strong bipartisan support for this. I know there's a letter, once again, as there was for the previous request from bipartisan leadership in the state legislature. We have a similar request for a letter from our congressional delegation. They did that last time. I'm optimistic they'll do that again. Business community is writing letters, Association of Cities. There's just a lot of strong support for this. So I feel we're really putting our best foot forward. And I'll be working hard to make sure that we receive the dollars that we desperately need to really address the significant infrastructure needs that we're facing.